Welcome back to the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sarraille. I've been waiting for this one with a man I highly respect and I've gotten to know over the past few months as we are gearing up for a project of our own. We'll talk a little about that, but Dan Myrick. And if you don't know that name, simply go back to the Time cover where it's got a picture of Dan and his partner, Eduardo.
Yes.
As the scariest movie ever. Dan was the writer, director, and producer of the Blair Witch Project, which has become, I think it's safe to say, almost cult. Like it has a cult or a strong followership behind it.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I mean, a whole new generation of kids have discovered it. Like I have a 16-year-old son and he's got some of his buds at school, like, have your dad sign a poster. I love that movie and blah, 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 blah. So definitely it spawned a whole like cult following and even probably more so overseas. There's like in Europe and China, and I get requests all over the world.
No kidding. Have you been over to China to talk about the film?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I did a symposium there a few years back.
Film school or?
It was they were trying to get into the horror film business in a big way. So they had a lot of South Korean directors there, American directors, Chinese directors. So that was really an interesting experience. So yeah, it's that whole part of the world is very much into Asian horror films, whether it's J-horror or South Korean horror. So it's big. Blair is really a big deal over there.
I'm going with a stereotype here, but it's a stereotype because it's true. I mean, the Chinese copy almost everything. Is there a Chinese Blair Witch?
Would not be surprised. There is a lot of spoofs and so-called remakes of Blair floating around. I haven't seen all of them, but I would not be surprised because we were in China at the time. This was a few years ago, but you'd go into a video store and it looked like you walked into a Blockbuster. I mean, they had end caps and advertisement. Everything there was pirated. The entire inventory was pirated. So, but the good news is they've embraced filmmaking. They've embraced that culture, and they're doing a lot of their own really great films now. And, but I'm a big advocate for not pirating people's artistic work. So that's a big thing for me. But yeah, Blair's been copied. You know, some would argue it's been remade for better or worse. And it was incredible. It was an incredible phenomena, and it still to this day is one of those things that's taught in film schools and all. I'm always surprised by when I see a reference to Blair in a book or magazine, or someone talks about you just got Blair Witched or whatever. It's become a verb. So it is. We were as surprised as anybody else.
We're going to get into the Blair Witch. The only thing I'll say is, I did see that when it came out, and I think the best description of how I felt was bothered. I don't know if you're like, I was bothered by the film.
Yeah.
Because it was realistic. I mean, even in special operations, we'd be out in the woods and we'd be in our little hide site and you'd hear the breaking of branches.
Yeah.
And somebody would say the joke, hey, you guys think it's the Blair Witch? So it became, that's pop culture, man. But beyond the film, most people don't know much about you. So let's circle back to, so right now we're in Bainbridge, Washington.
Right.
And it's June and it was 52 degrees this morning.
Yeah.
But you were born in Florida. Take us back to your childhood.
Yeah.
What brought you here?
I'm a native Floridian, born 1963 in Sarasota, and lived on Longboat Key for many years, and didn't know how good I had it back there. I mean, I grew up on a canal, little 2-bedroom place. My dad was an engineer. Mom was an artist. And, we were a stone's throw from the bay and, a bike ride to the beach on the Gulf. And, I don't think I wore shoes until I was 12. It was just that kind of lifestyle. And, had 2 or 3 close friends on the island, on the key there. And it was a simple time, like it was, I think, for a lot of people in the 60s and 70s. It was, our version of iPads were get out of the house and go don't come back until dinner.
Until 8 p.m. Yeah.
Exactly. When it gets dark. So,
and so during the days, were you guys at the beach most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, we did. We play in the woods a lot. I love playing in the woods, and we build forts, and we just used our imaginations. I mean, there was sometimes, believe it or not, we just stood around bored out of our minds. I mean, a lot of people are afraid to have their kids just be bored. So, yeah, sometimes you're just bored, and you come up with something, but.
Today your parents would be reported to the
right. Yeah. No, I tell my kids it's okay to be bored, but invariably, if you've got an active mind, you'll come up with something. You'll start drawing or whatever. I used to like to draw a lot. But yeah, growing up back in those days was simple, and my dad taught me a lot, and my mom taught me a lot. We didn't have a lot of money, but you didn't need a lot of money in those days to live on the Key. Where now that same piece of property would probably go for $1.5 million. It's crazy, but yeah, my dad, climbed poles and worked as an electrical engineer and for Florida Power and Light Company, and yeah, pretty simple times.
Now, your mom bought you if our research is right, a 35 millimeter camera, and you took that to heart. Was that the start of what has become your passion, your career?
I mean, I got sort of my artistic sense from my mom. So I used to love to draw a lot. And in particular, you'll get a kick out of this, Army dioramas. So, and she would make fun of me because I would have this big piece of paper and I'd draw this elaborate combat war, planes coming in, choppers landing, people fighting, and I would do all the sound effects. I had the whole music score in my head, and I'm doing all the sound effects of the
Flight of the Valkyrie,
the whole bit, man. And I'm sitting, and I'll do that for hours. And she like, Danny, what are you doing in there? And it's like I'm drawing this warp sequence because I grew up on Sands of Iwo Jima and all those movies. I used to love that stuff. And I was really, I mentioned earlier, I was really into World War II airplanes. So I drawing P-40 Warhawks and Corsairs and P-51, of course, and all that kind of stuff. So I really was into the visual medium of drawing. And then my Aunt Pat bought me this book called Movie Magic, and it showed up one Christmas, and I opened it up, and and it was all the behind the scenes of how the big movies were made, King Kong and all those films. Like, oh, there's a whole industry here behind the scenes of all this, and that's really what sparked my curiosity.
And how old are you at this time?
Probably, I don't know, 11, 12 in that neighborhood. And so about a year or so later, my mom bought me that camera, and that's sort of where I first learned kind of a visual sense, composition, lighting, started to kind of get a feel for it. And then shortly after that, I got my hands on like one of the first video cameras that came out in the day. It's like, man, you can shoot your own movies. And so we did a couple of movies, quote unquote. One was called Skateboarders because we were into skateboarding and whatnot. So we did this movie called me and my best friend at the time. And so yeah, the bug sort of grabbed me, and from that point on, I could remember this is sort of what I want to do. I'm not quite sure how to get there, but I want to learn how to make people feel this way. When you go into a movie and you come out with that feeling, I want to make people feel that way. I remember thinking that.
So I know before this interview we talked about the docuseries. Well, let's call it a historical fiction. The Offer by Paramount, and they mainly follow Al Ruddy.
Yeah.
And again, what's his name? Miles Teller. You can speak up. So Miles Teller, the guy seems like he's in everything right now, but the guy who plays Bob Evans, the head of Paramount, talks about the feeling you get. I mean, we talked about this. I love movies because it's the one time I can block out all the crap in my life. Yeah. I can imagine I'm a superhero. Yeah, I just said that. Mm-hmm. I've got my popcorn and Diet Coke. That's like a mandatory.
I'm with you.
And you can make this seemingly impossible possible. Yeah. Just through the dreaming of the film.
Well, I'm a firm believer that we're all storytellers. Like, this is one of the things when I go to a film school and they have me in for a panel or to teach for a little bit or whatever. We all have a script inside of us. We're all storytellers at the end of the day. One of the examples I use, because our brains are wired that way. You're walking down the street and you see your neighbor's car parked in the driveway and there's a dent in the side of the quarter panel. You immediately start thinking, well, how'd that dent get there? It wasn't there yesterday. Was he in a parking lot? Was he speeding? Was he drunk last night?
Did he hit and kill somebody?
Did he hit and kill somebody? These narratives start cycling in your head because that's the way our brains are wired. So we all, I think, have that common need to tell a story and to have stories told to us. And I think that's what's so wonderful about filmmaking is it brings all these disciplines, whether it's writing, visuals, music, sound, all together in one big medium that allows us to escape into these stories. And there's nothing like it when it's done well. It'll change your life. I mean, it's changed policies. It's changed. Yeah. I mean, it's an incredibly influential medium. And we all, I don't care who you are, what political persuasion you are, we all have heroes that were from movies. And I think that's a really kind of humbling place to be and to be a part of that process for people. Whenever anyone comes up to me, especially a young filmmaker, and says, your movie inspired me to make movies.
That's awesome, dude.
That's the coolest thing in the world, because you may be 10 times better than me, and you may be the next Scorsese out there. And 10 years from now, you reference Blair Witch, like I was part of the DNA of this whole process. So it's really humbling. It's just an amazing place to be, to have people like experience that in a movie theater and have that, I think, really necessary escapism. We need that. We need that time of relief, that time of fantasy in our lives to help get us through some of the tougher times. So yeah, it's great to be a part of that.
I'm going to be a romantic here. The one hope I would have is that people walk out of films and they do recognize that, one, you can be the hero of your own film.
Yeah.
As bland and dull, and I think my life is bland and dull. As bland and dull as it is,
this is the SEAL guy talking here.
I'm still the hero of my own story. And if I try to tell my kids anything, it's define success for yourself and then pour into it, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be sexy. It doesn't have to be, but the power of movies, you just hit it. Have you ever met a foreigner who hasn't in their mind shaped their opinions about Americans that's not based off movies?
I mean, the culture, especially American culture, when I think of, Western culture in general, I mean, when you see, remote villages in the farthest reaches of Africa and all, and they're wearing like Nike t-shirts, we know we've reached pretty much every corner of the universe. It is, and to me, we call it American culture, but for me, America is an ideal. It's a state of mind of allowing people to explore, to innovate, to be their best selves. And there's good and bad that comes with all that. But I think on the whole, the world's a better place because we're allowing anybody to be their best self, right? And that's what we're all fighting for. And movies and pop culture are all of us out there trying to do cool stuff. We're up to things and express ourselves, and that's magnetic. That's why that pop culture spreads so readily, because everybody really wants that.
Yeah.
You look at these dictatorships overseas, and 90% of their job is trying to keep it out, trying to keep their populace in the dark about that need to express yourself. And you can only do that for so long. I think it's unsustainable to keep it out forever. Because it's funny, my wife and I, when we were, and not to get too off track here, but the Iraq War, like prior to the run up to the Iraq War, my wife she's a huge researcher, and she works for research departments and stuff like that. It's a writer herself, but we were tracking blogs of local Iraqis in Baghdad, just kids and families and all that. They're posting their daily lives there. And the number one pastime in Iraq was playing Unreal, the game Unreal. And it was like, yeah, they're just teenagers. They're just like teenagers anywhere else. They're getting pirated copies of video games and they want to play video games. And so that escapism that we all share, I think, is a common thread through humanity. We're all storytellers, and we like to be taken away, and we would like to tell stories. We like to hear them, and it's just a lot of fun to be a part of that process.
And I know we're going to talk about the movie experience with streaming platforms. There's just nothing that replaces that experience, like going to a theater, man. The big screen, the candy, the popcorn, the stadium seating. It's just not the.
I mean, and I at the risk of sounding like some hardcore purist, it really is its own experience, its own medium. There may be some digital VR equivalent down the road or something, but going into a theater, seeing that 30, 40-foot screen in front of you and having your attention focused just on that, because it's just not cool to pop out your cell phone and start surfing or anything. You have to be focused on on the movie. And yeah, I love that large popcorn in my hand and that Diet Coke. And it is that 2 hours where you just channel everything out and just be focused on the movie. And when it's done well, you come out a changed person. You think about that movie and it never leaves you. And those experiences they don't come every day. You can't, well, I think part of the problem with Hollywood is they try to cheapen that whole experience. They put bad product on the screen, so everyone's gotten jaded by it. Mm-hmm. But when it's done right with the right movie, it's like nothing else. It really is.
So that brings up a question. You go and you watch a movie that is just so indescribably bad.
Yeah.
And you ask yourself, what studio in their right mind put money behind that? Is part of the industry just sometimes like you've got to produce some volume of films?
Well, everything. I think this applies to most any industry, even the military. I think they find a formula that worked then, mm-hmm. and they try to
don't fight the last war.
Exactly. Yeah. They try to cut and paste that same formula, and that's low risk, right? And everybody wants to keep their job in the studio system. Nobody wants to be the one person. You know what? Let's try something different. And if they fail, they're done, right? So it's a very risk-adverse environment. So they try to go with what will work, what worked last 3 or 4 times. And I get it. It's a business. They've got shareholders. Yeah. They're trying to not or strike this balance between risky films and ones that they know will make money. I mean, look, if another Star Wars movie gets stamped out, people are going to go see it. It's like printing money. Mm-hmm. So I get that. But the problem on the flip side is that the product that comes out in those theaters just looks like glorified TV shows after a while. You're like, man, this isn't what it used to be when the first Star Wars came out or whatever. So it tends to turn off a lot of people because it's not cheap to go see a movie. When you've got an alternative like Netflix at home, you're going to spend $20, $15 for a ticket, then God knows you get popcorn and Coke for your family. I mean, you could drop $100, $150 and not even think about it. Yeah. And if it's something that you could get for $3.99 on Netflix, a week later, that's a tough sell. So it better be worth it, right? So that's, I think, sort of the dilemma theaters are in right now, is that they're used to kind of pumping out sort of average product, but people are like tired of that, spending that kind of money. But you have a Top Gun come out or a Dune or an event film like that, people will go. The box office is crazy for Top Gun because that's one of those films. Yeah, I'm taking my son and my kids out to Top Gun and we're going to a movie because that's the way you want to watch it.
And they held on to that for 2 years, right?
Yeah, well, that's a big,
because COVID came out and they're like, hey, just not.
Yeah, that was one of those things. I mean, Tom Cruise is like the hardest working guy in Hollywood. And
no kidding.
And, So, and to his credit, he really wants to make sure he knows exactly his lane. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm the freaking movie star of the world. This thing has got to rock, and it has to have X, Y, Z. He has total control of the process. So he makes blockbusters. The guy is like nobody else. So he takes his time and does it right. And
which is the hardest thing to do, though, to hold a film for 2 years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Patience, man.
He's up there with like a Kubrick when it comes to having power. And like when Kubrick did Eyes Wide Shut, he said to the studio, look, you want me to do Eyes Wide Shut? I don't want to do Eyes Wide Shut. So I need Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise on my set for 2 years, and they can't do anything else. And like, okay, the two biggest stars in Hollywood, you got them for 2 years, and all right, that's it. And see you when you're done. So, but everybody wanted to be in business with Stanley Kubrick. So you can count on one hand the filmmakers and actors that have that kind of pull with the studios. So it's very rare. But yeah, he made sure it was done right and it was shot right. And Bruckheimer himself is a big movie guy. Big as in size and scope. So they had that was the A-listers on that film. And one of Cruise's big talking points and his big push is that he does a lot of his own stunts. He's a pilot himself.
He's a skydiver. Yeah.
He's crazy. And they were like, let us fly an F-35. No, dude. You finally kind of drew the line. Like, we'll give you a trainer over here, but we're not letting you fly the F-35. It's, $100 million plane or whatever. It's like, you see that going to the side of a mountain, but
he's worth it.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
But but they did it right. They did a great job on the film. It was a really super entertaining film, and I think story wise they did a good job as well.
So you're an anomaly in the sense of it almost sounds like you knew what you wanted to do when you were young. You choose to go to the University of Central Florida.
Yeah.
Film school.
Right.
Was that a formative period of your time in terms of the curriculum and professors?
Absolutely. I think, it became fashionable for a while to sort of bash on film schools. Mm-hmm. And speaking from my own personal experience, I kind of, I went into the business. I mean, when I graduated from high school, we didn't have any money for college. So I had to go out and get a real job. And so I worked for a while as an editor, did, odd video jobs. I started a small video company in Fort Myers, Florida. Actually, we were the first company to videotape real estate listings, and no one had been doing it at that time. So we should videotape real estate listings. They all have us pictures. So we started that whole trend. Nobody knows this. We started that whole trend of videotaping, high-end real estate listings. And Century 21 came in and just
crushed it.
Yeah. We were done.
They had mass. They had volume.
It wasn't the career path I wanted to be in anyway, but I'm always like trying to come up with ideas. But so yeah, my mom said, Danny, you need to go back to school. So I signed up, did community college, got my AA degree at the local community college because I could afford it, and then got accepted to the University of Central Florida inaugural film program. They wanted to see a reel and submit an essay, so I did all that. So got in first class. So I said, I'm moving to Orlando, and I sold my car, sold everything, got a roommate, and went up to Orlando, got set, and started learning the real process of making a film. This is how you actually tell a story on film, learning it from established instructors, and more importantly, meeting a group of like-minded people, young, energetic, 20-somethings, full of applesauce, thinking we were going to conquer the world. But it was being in that energy and that creative environment was really an amazing experience for me. And we'll always value it. It was more than a film school. It was a family, and getting to know, filmmakers that I would work with for years and years after that. Like, the guys that we did Blair Witch with were all my filmmaking friends. So it was a great time for me, and always look back on it fondly, even though it's getting farther and farther in the distance.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I went and got my MBA because when I left the military, I didn't know a damn thing about business. We use a different set of tools for risk mitigation and planning. And it was less about what I learned and more about the tribe you're surrounded with. And one, I was 39, they're all like in their 27s.
Well, yeah, I'm getting my own at Johns Hopkins now. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So I'm doing philosophy there because I just want to be, to keep expanding and learning. But like you said, it's about meeting the people and being with like-minded, smart, energized individuals that really inspire you. And I'm a competitive guy too. So I'm surrounded by a bunch of competitive filmmakers and we're all kind of out trying to outdo each other.
Yeah. It sounds like you're all about tribe. Iron sharpens iron. So is one man sharpens another. And you happen to meet a certain individual there. Mm-hmm. And in doing the research, so you did the Blair Witch with Eduardo Sanchez.
Yes.
But what we found is you said something about the reason you loved Eduardo so much is a reason that most people don't like people that disagree with them. They want like-minded people that are just going to go with their narrative. You said Eduardo would challenge your thoughts and you guys would have these heated debates. What was it about that relationship that, you ultimately made a phone call to Eduardo and said, "Hey, remember my idea about the woods?"
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's a tough tug of war. I mean it's hard to acknowledge that maybe your idea is not the best idea of the moment, and that the collaboration with someone that you respect and that's creative may have a better idea than you, or expound on an idea that you came up with and make it better, so it becomes bigger than the sum of its parts. So. Ed and I just had a great creative exchange. It was like nobody else. He and I, not all the ideas were great, but we'd always come away with something better than what we individually thought of originally. And I think Blair Witch was a product of that collaboration, that it wouldn't have been as good if any one of us had done it on our own. And our producer, Greg Hale, also was a big contributor, and Mike Manello and Rob Cowie. We were sort of like a band, all kind of, writing the music together. And that collaboration was, it's a rare thing. And it's not even something that necessarily is sustainable forever. Even the best bands break up eventually. Yeah. But for that period in our lives, it was the right time, the right kind of movie, and the right kind of collaboration, because it was an experiment. Nobody really knew what we were getting into. There was no real kind of blueprint for the kind of movie we were making. I mean, Greg, as a matter of fact, Greg Hale, our producer, was a former SF guy. And when we were out shooting the film, we're like, well, we needed this thing to look realistic, and we can't have cameras out there and a crew. And how do we get them through the woods but still control where they're going? Well, we have these GPS things, like hunters use these GPS devices. So we use these devices, and his military knowledge sort of laid out the logistics of how to map out the actors getting from point A to point B, having escape plans and all this in case someone gets hurt. All that stuff he brought to bear. It would have been a complete cluster screw up if it had just been Ed and I, because we had no clue about any of the logistics stuff. So it was all that collaboration, not only creatively, but also from the logistics standpoint, that made Blair what it was. And that's all spawned from film school, us knowing each other in film school.
But there was a period. So you guys graduate?
Yeah.
University of Central Florida Film School. You all go off and you're holding different jobs.
Yeah.
And so I know you made a phone call to Eduardo and said, "Hey,
let's do that woods movie."
Was there something? I mean, was it one of these? I don't want to say odd jobs, but was there just no passion in the jobs that you held at the time? You're like, "Hey, this is not what I was meant for."
Yeah, well, that's sort of the hard reality. You're in this amazing environment in film school. Everyone's making movies, and we're all going to be the next Spielberg, and da da da. And then you graduate, and suddenly reality hits, and like you have your film degree, and no one gives a shit, right? So. Okay, now I got to make a living. So I get odd jobs editing. I learned like my editing chops doing, infomercials and stuff like that. So you work in that. I worked a little bit as a DP for a while in local films, and they're all bad movies. I don't even go all the details of the bad films I've been on. But So you're bouncing around and like, wow, this big Spielbergian dream I had is starting to fade away because you got the light bill to pay, right? You've got reality. And it's a very tough thing to like be, in your mid-20s and all your friends that aren't crazy filmmakers are getting real jobs and they're getting married and they have nice cars and you're still living like a film student and with this idea that you're going to direct a movie one day. And that's a tough place to be. It was a real rude awakening for us. And that's when I finally said, you know what, Ed? He was up like designing websites up in Maryland. It's like, and we didn't hate our jobs. It just wasn't what we had envisioned for ourselves. So we said, look, man, let's do this Woods movie. It's the cheapest film we could do. And it was the easiest one logistically that we could pull off. So the entry point to get it made was lower than anything else that we had in our heads. So we were like, oh, all right, let's do it. And we started kind of hammering it out. And then Greg Hale got involved and I pitched it to him. He was working as a set dresser in LA at the time. And he was in the same headspace as we were. Just, this isn't what I wanted to do with my life. So I pitched Greg the idea, the Blair Witch premise, and he was like, holy jeez, man, how do I get involved? And so he had saved up some money because he's the more responsible one of the three of us. So I'll throw in $5,000, dude, if you want to get this thing going. And I said, okay, let's do it. And so he helped develop it along with Ed and I, and that's really got the ball rolling, is that we were sort of just in this stasis, in this place after film school, after having these big ideas, and realizing, okay, the dreams that we had weren't being realized, so we have to go find a way to make it happen.
Before you guys actually got to filming this thing, had you ever pitched it to mentors or anyone who said, hey, this really isn't a good idea?
Well, we had the notion, I was thinking that, it's a difficult idea to pitch because no one had done a movie like that before. So it's not like, oh, girl meets guy and they fall in love. You don't have any of that to fall back on. So no one had any clue about what kind of movie we're going to make. So I came up with the idea of shooting a kind of a proof of concept video, an 8-minute, we call it the investor reel, but it was basically an 8-minute proof of concept. Before we had shot the actual movie, Ed was still in Maryland at the time, so Greg and I kind of put together this proof of concept, and it was a fake documentary about the documentary we were going to shoot. So it's like a meta movie, right? So we put together this whole thing about this found footage came up. The rights are going to come up to it. Haxon Films, which is our production company, we're going to get the rights to it. We're going to show the world, and we completely mapped out the backstory to it all, and it was completely fake. And we said to ourselves, well, if we can go into a room full of dentists or doctors and fool them with this 8-minute reel, then we can say, we're going to do this for a whole movie. And we'll let that sell it, the whole idea. So we did that. We pitched rooms full of doctors, rooms full of dentists, a producer, wannabe producer here and there in Orlando and all. No one bit on it. And then one day I got a call from our co-producer friend, Mike Manello, and said, John Pearson's coming into town. And John Pearson at the time was a producer's rep. He discovered Spike Lee, Kevin Smith. He was a big deal in the indie film world. And he had his own TV show called Split Screen on Bravo. And basically it was a series, like an anthology series of these wacky individuals that he did stories about. And it was a really fun show. But he liked to hire local filmmakers. Whenever he was in town to do a local story, he liked to hire local shooters and stuff like that. So he was in town in Orlando to do Gatorlando. There's that tourist trap, that alligator tourist trap. It's hilarious. So he's in Orlando to Gatorlando. And Mike called me up and said, hey, John Pearson's coming in town. He's looking for a local shooter. Do you want to apply? And I, yeah, man, it's John Pearson. And this is just when we wrapped up our investor reel, right? So I said to myself, okay, if I can get on, so I talked to John on the phone. Yeah, if you can run camera, come on out. So awesome. So I'll give it about 3 days. It was about a 4-day shoot. So get to know him, let him trust me, and then I can hand him my tape of this investor reel. So we did the Gatorlando segment, had a blast. He's a super cool guy. And at the end, when we were wrapping it up, said, John, I know you've probably heard this a million times, but I've got this pitch for this movie that I want to do called Blair Witch. And he goes, okay, send me the tape. And his production studios were in Jersey. So sent it to him like a couple days later. And I figured that was going to be the end of it, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A week later, he calls me and says, Dan, what the hell is this? Is this real? And I just started laughing. I said, no, John, it's all fake. That's the whole point of the movie. He goes, oh my God. Okay. Tell you what, I want to show this as my last episode on split screen. It's a cliffhanger. Like, really? So I said, I'll pay you the rights to do that. He paid us $5,000 for the rights to do it. I'm like, what? I mean, I'm like,
so now you guys are up to 10,000.
Yeah. So I told Greg and Ed, I said, Pearson's going to show our investor reel on the last episode of Split Screen and play it as if it were real, right? And Bravo had a pretty good size audience at the time. So that's what happened. And so they set it up for the second season, like next spring, where we have shot the film. They're gonna do a revisit for the premiere episode of the second season. So where we get another hit on his show then. So that really got the ball rolling, because when we got the kind of blessing from John Pearson, people started to notice. Yeah. And so yeah, went out. We had about $35,000 or so raised, and we went out and shot the movie in Maryland, and came back and started editing. Ed and I were editing, and that was, how long did it take us to edit? Like 8-9 months. Yeah, forever. Almost a year to edit the movie.
Let me ask this before we get to the editing part, and we got to take a mid-roll break. So, you guys are out there in the woods for 8 days. We had read that you tried to create conditions for the actors that brought out anxiety, and so you guys would. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is it safe to say you messed with them at night?
We did, yeah. It was like our version of Sears School, I guess. It was like they knew what was coming. I mean, as far as that we were going to mess with them. Yes. So it wasn't like they had no idea. I mean, they knew they were in a movie, and our whole approach was trying to preserve this realism, and we wanted them to remain in character as much as possible. And the mandate was to just shoot everything. We'll supply you with plenty of footage or blank tapes and all that. And at each one of these waypoints, excuse me, there'd be a milk crate with more batteries for their cameras, more tapes and more film for the cameras. And they were to leave off what they shot so we could grab it. So that was to keep them in character as much as possible. And at each one of these waypoints is where they were instructed to set up their camp. Meanwhile, Ed and I were shadowing them in the woods, to observe their performances. So we'd also review their tapes every night. And we're in full camo. We're like, we had to be like, we didn't have ghillie suits or anything like that on, but we were in full camo hiding in the bushes because we never knew which way they were going to flash a camera around. We wouldn't want to tell them like, oh, only shoot in that direction. We wanted them to be able to go anywhere. So we didn't want two directors standing watching in the business. Yeah. So we had to be hiding and in camo watching their performance. So every now and then we had to reset things, and because Heather might have been going too hot with her performance, we had to kind of tune her down. So we had made these kind of on the fly audible adjustments along the way, and then of course watch the footage as dailies every night to see how things were progressing. And that's sort of how we directed them and kept them on the narrative path, but also preserved this sort of stage of reality so they could be in character almost the whole time. So at night we would tell them, for example, like the scene with this tent's shaking, like, okay, guys, we don't want anybody getting hurt. As you know, the woods are not lit like it is in Hollywood. Like when you're at night in the woods, it's pitch black, unless you got a full moon, but if you've got a pretty big canopy, it is dark and you can get an eye poked out. It can be very dangerous. So we mapped out a trail for them to run on so they wouldn't get hurt. So I just follow, here's the stick here. And
even then, that's hard.
They're a little sketchy. Yeah. And they're 3 actors, right? So, they're not like outdoorsmen. So we gave them, follow the trail, stay on the trail, don't go run off the trail. Something's going to happen. Just roll camera. The minute something happens, just start rolling camera. They didn't know exactly what would happen. So we had the baby's voices outside the tent. We started shaking the tent, and that was their cue to bolt. So we did that. And that was an example where logistically we had to have it kind of mapped out, but it was improvised as well. So it was a little combination of both. But it was a lot of that. And
so that's a little bit of sleep deprivation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we wanted to, we have a famous line from Greg said, like, your safety is our primary concern, but your comfort is not. That was typical, like, SF guy, right? So it was 8 days. I mean, they were never going to starve, right?
And so I've got to ask, did I read that correctly? You started to reduce their calories?
We ramped back their calories. I mean, because it's hard to fake being that tired, you know, even with makeup and all. I mean, you tell when someone's just bloody exhausted.
Yes.
And when you're running a caloric deficit, you just don't want to do anything. You're just laying around. You don't want to move. You don't want to get up. You don't even want to go to the bathroom. You're just so beat down. And we wanted to have that look with them. So and it was raining part of the time, which makes everything more miserable. Yeah. So again, we gave them enough to get by, but we ramped it down to sort of allow them to be more in character throughout that whole process. And so it was a little bit of, we called it method filmmaking, where we were sort of subjecting them to this sort of real world thing. I mean, it's just like in, you know, like when you guys have the fake prison camp exercise. I mean, you know, they're not going to actually shoot you in the head or anything like that, but it's still brutal.
You're pissed.
And you're mad and you're angry and you're tired. Okay, I get it, guys. I'm done. You know? So it was sort of a lot like that in a smaller way, where they knew they were doing this movie, this crazy, wacky movie, but they were pissed and they were.
I bet they didn't know what they signed up for.
They had a general idea, and credit to Heather. I mean, here's a female, right?
Yeah.
Bunch of dudes in the woods. We're going to shoot this snuff film. We're like, well, hold on. What are we doing now? So I really have to credit her for being pretty ballsy about going out there. And she even brought a big, like, hunting knife with her just in case things went south. She had a little protection, but after a while,
smart, well-trained woman,
smart girl. Yeah. So it was, but after a while, especially with Greg's expertise, like, we're mapping out, we got, you know, we're definitely concerned about your safety and this and that. And it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be camping in the woods, and there's its own sets of hardships, but this ain't going to be like a normal movie. There's not going to be a Porta-John, you know, offset or trailer for you to go back to after things wrap up. It's going to be camping for 8 days in the woods.
And it was not a normal movie on the back end.
No.
Which made it so unique. Yeah. I want to go to a mid-roll break, and what we do for a mid-roll break is we ask 2 questions, and then I want to get into what came next. I've got to assume it was a roller coaster, because you guys couldn't anticipate it. I mean, we all want whatever we do to blow up. I mean, that is almost an understatement to what Blair Witch became.
Yeah, it was. Even to this day, I'm sort of amazed by how big it got and how ill-prepared we were for it. But it was like no other movie. I mean, I've been in this business now for 25, almost 30 years. And there hasn't been a movie since that's been that kind of culturally changing moment. And it's amazing to be a part of that, but we learned a lot in that process, and it certainly took all of us by surprise.
That's insane. And we're going to get to that. So the 2 questions. 1, biggest regret of your life.
Biggest regret of my life.
And these are meant to be stump the chumps. No.
I've got quite a few. I'm trying to pick which one.
If not, we'll default to your wife.
She's got a whole list.
She's ready.
I mean, I wish I had stayed in college earlier. I mean, I kind of went in and out. I would have gotten, I think, a lot farther sooner had I been better disciplined. To stay in college, I was kind of a dreamer, and just should have knuckled down and stuck it out. So I kind of regret I got sort of a late start in that process. So that's, I don't know if that's the biggest regret, but that's definitely one I would, if I had to do it over,
That's amazing you say that.
I would stuck it out.
Because your route, there may have been a maturation process there that you just needed that you wouldn't have gotten in school.
I mean, I think it's a very good argument, and not everybody's ready to jump right into academics out of high school. You want to have some time to kind of learn, find yourself. So I get that. So who knows? I mean, I am where I'm at for the choices I've made. But that, I think if I had to do it over again, I'd probably would have attempted to stick it out a little more. I was just, mucking about as a 18, 19-year-old, early 20 something year old, not being as disciplined as I think I should have been or I could have been. So
you mentioned too much of a dreamer. It seems like that has a bad connotation now. People are like, oh, he's just a dreamer. Like, good. Just teach him the importance of operationalizing or executing upon those dreams.
Yeah.
Like, I want my kids to be dreamers. I just want them to know how to take action to operationalize that dream.
And that's a good point. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dreaming, and we encourage it in our own kids. I love the fact that both my kids are artistic. My son loves playing music, and my daughter is a really good drawer. And fundamentally, it's if you're happy, if you get up in the morning and you're happy doing what you're doing, and you're able to make a living at it, you slayed the beast. And I've said this a million times. And I tell them that it's like, look, you don't need to be the next Elon Musk. There'll be those folks out there. But if you can get up and you love your job and you can raise a family and you're doing better than 99% of the people out there. It really is. So find a way to make those dreams make you enough of a living to be comfortable and happy, and you're good to go. I don't think they're mutually exclusive ideas. I don't think you have to be an attorney if you hate being an attorney to make money or whatever. So I think that's very possible. And was lucky enough to be able to do that. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I mean, there were my friends that were my age with nice new cars, and they had a cool apartment and had all the stuff, but they were working some crap job they hated, and I was doing what I loved to do, and I didn't have two pennies to rub together. But I'm thinking, down long term, that'll change, and you have to believe in yourself and have to believe that what you're doing will pay off.
For all the good things that America is, I think that has become one of the most prominent definitions publicly of success is money.
Yeah,
and you just hit it. Hey man, I had a great job shortly after I retired, and I was making good money. But I was miserable in that environment. Yeah. Miserable.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah.
And it was God bless my wife. I mean, she didn't mind the money that we were pulling in.
Yeah.
But she's like, dude, this isn't you. Just leave. And don't get me wrong. When I left, there's been some struggles. That income pretty much came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
But now that I've got my own team, and God, I hope I'm creating the environment that they're enjoying and not, having the same feelings, but it's been that much more enjoyable.
It is. And that's really what we're all doing. We're looking for happiness, right? At the end of the day. And I credit my wife for the same thing, where I remember agonizing over things, and she just gave me the best piece of wisdom in the world. Like, you got to enjoy the journey. You can sit there and spend all your whole time worrying about the destination. You got to enjoy that journey. And it's tough sometimes, because sometimes a journey at the moment sucks, but overall, it's getting you where you want to go, but you have to enjoy that process. And that's, I think, lost a lot in American culture, where it's all focused on who's got the biggest house, who's got the nicest car, who's got XYZ, what's your bank account versus this bank account. It's like, man, I know so many people in Hollywood that have a lot of credits and a lot of money and they're all miserable. They're on their third wife and their kids are estranged. Like, I don't want to be that guy. And I was going down that road. Like shortly after Blair Witch, we were, doing raw feed projects. We were doing 6 movies for Warner Brothers. I was doing my own movie in Morocco, and I was not sleeping. I had insomnia like crazy, and I was up all night, and it was really a difficult time for us. And that's one of the reasons why we came out initially to Seattle to sort of take a sabbatical from all that and kind of recalibrate, like what's important in my life. I mean, it's not the volume of movies I'm making. It's choosing the right projects that are good for me, good for our family, and having a normal life, a balance. And it's a tricky thing to find. Not a lot of people ever find that. And so, yeah, I think I credit my wife for being sort of my mentor in that department. She's a lot smarter than me in a lot of ways, but that was one of those things where you kind of get caught up with the competition. You get caught up with keeping up with the Joneses and all that. And like, I don't need to be the next Spielberg.
Dude, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
But so this, I think the period, I think I know what you're talking about is like 2006, 2009.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was great to be written up in the articles, and Dan's really,
it feels pretty freaking good, dude. Let's be honest.
Everyone's like, man, you're kicking ass, blah, blah, blah. And like, that's great and all, but I'm not sleeping. I'm taking Ambien every night. And it was really hard. And we had just had our son Tucker, so I was not getting to see him at all. And I didn't want him growing up on a movie set or anything like that. And it was, he went straight in the NICU right after the birth. So that was
preemie.
Yeah.
No,
respiratory issues.
My daughter was a preemie for, she was in the NICU for 3 months. Those were 3 of the hardest months. It sounds like where you were at back then is where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm, I get the text from all my buddies like, bro, you're crushing it. I'm like, smoke and mirrors, man. That's my reply. Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors, yeah.
But I struggle with, I think I confuse activity or motion with progress.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, move more, do more.
Yeah.
And it's actually not the smart way of doing business. So that's very interesting, man.
Yeah. You have to work. And that's part, it's just from growing up and become more mature. I mean, it's like Michael Jordan may have lost his step later in his career, but he still scored the same amount of points. He just was smarter with.
He saw the more direct line.
Exactly.
To
So it's you kind of get that. So okay, motion and movement doesn't necessarily mean progress. It's just being smarter about who you work with and the projects that you do. And at the end of the day, and a lot of that to me is non-motion. Is like taking the time
smarter, not harder,
just to chill and to enjoy life. Go out on a date with your wife. I mean, just take some time for yourself to not think about work and doing and conquering the world all the time. And it's hard for a kind of personality that's used to conquering and getting and being competitive. It's hard to do that. I'm a competitive person, and
I can tell.
But I find
we're looking from the nod from the wife. She's like,
yeah, I'm fine.
That wasn't a good nod. It was like, to a detriment.
Yeah, but I took up like doing home projects and stuff. Like back in Sierra Madre, we did a lot of remodeling and stuff. So I like learning about tools. I got it from my dad. So I built a deck, and so between projects, I'm very constructive. I don't.
So you're not really relaxing. I mean, you're learning, but
it's relaxing for me. It's therapeutic for me because the thing I like about a home project is that, unlike the film business, is that you can come up with an idea. I want to build a deck, or I want to do something to improve the house, quality of life of the kids and all, that I can dream up, and I can go to Home Depot. I can get the stuff, bring it home, build it, complete it. It's done. I've got nobody's approval other than hers to get what's in my head in reality. Mm-hmm. Unlike a movie or a pitch, it's like you could pitch for years and you're waiting for that phone to ring or someone to say yes. And this is the offset to that. I can get something done that I think of, and it's all upside for me. You get exercise, you get outside, fresh air, learn some new tools. It's an excuse to buy some really cool tools, which is filling up the garage. But you can step back and say, hey, we got a new deck. We got to do this. We got to do that. So it's to me, therapeutic.
So we're going to take that mid-roll break, and we'll be right back. So welcome back to the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. We're here with Dan Myrick. Dan, where we left off, so you guys are done filming. You've put your actors through the equivalent of military SEER school torture. And then you guys go into the editing phase, which lasts 8 to 9 months.
Right.
Dude, walk me through, I mean, because now you've got to distribute this thing, and it doesn't sound like you've had distribution totally secured at this point.
Not at all. No, it was a crazy process because, as I mentioned earlier, the movie itself was sort of an experimental approach to doing a movie. And part of what Ed and I were trying to accomplish with that initial shooting in the woods was to create this sense of realism, improvisation that looked 100% genuine. And but initially, that footage in the woods was supposed to only comprise about 20 minutes of the final film. Mm-hmm. We had a phase 2 that we were shooting that would be a lot of talking heads, analysis about what was going on, backstory. So that was all being shot as well to be included in with the edit. And it was going to be more of a traditional, like a in search of documentary kind of thing. So we were putting all this together, and through the months, we started whittling it down and whittling it down and whittling it down, and realized after a while that actually we had the whole movie in just the found footage portion of it. And that took a while to sort of reveal itself through the edit process. And once we finally got to that kind of painful place, we had to screen it. And that's one of the hardest things I think for anybody to do, whether you're writing a book or you're doing a movie or you're an actor, going up on the screen, or a comedian doing their bit. You've got to go in front of an audience and take your hits, right? And so the initial screening we held at University of Central Florida Film Program, of all places. So it was a couple of years after ours was done. And that was a tough crowd. Nobody liked the movie. Granted, it was about 2.5 hours long, but we got hammered at that screening. We felt miserable after that.
No kidding.
Yeah. And you're a film student reviewing a movie that you're kind of by design to critique. That's why you're kind of...
They're 18, 19. They've got...
Yeah, they got all their opinions, right? Yeah. So that came away with dispiriting for us. And then, so we did back, and look, when you screen things for certain groups of people, regardless of the demographics, you can start to sense that there's a common issue going on, right? It's like, so we were teasing out what these common issues were with the screenings that we were doing. And then we made some adjustments to the movie. And then we screened it at the Enzion Theater, which was like the independent film house in Orlando. It was sort of a rough cut. And in the audience was this guy. His name was Kevin Fox. He was a producer from LA who was out on another movie. And a mutual friend said, "Hey, come check out our friend's Blair movie. Would you, it was on the weekend." So he said, "Yeah, I'll come check it out." So we screened it for the Enzion, so the next revision of the film, and after it was over, the guy came up to us. Kevin Fox came up to Ed and I and said, "You guys, I loved your movie," and he said, "I'll tell you what, you're going to be famous." It was the first thing out of his mouth. You guys are going to be famous. We're like, "What?" And that's when we was like, "Oh, complete 180 from the screening at UCF," yeah. Right? So people were really, loving the scare moments and the funny moments and all that. We still had a lot of trimming to do, but we realized that, we might have something that's worth submitting to festivals, or have something that's worth viewing. But he was like the first one that saw this could be something big, like a big indie movie, right? So yeah, we went back to the edit suite, and Ed and I just continued tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. And then we took it to New York, had a screening in New York. And Kevin Fox had connections with Jeremy Walker at Klein & Walker, which is a publicity firm in New York. And they were a pretty big deal in the indie space. And so he invited them. And Jeremy Walker was in the audience and saw the movie and said, "This is amazing. I've got to be a part of this movie."
No way.
So we had this publicist on board from New York. We're like, "Oh my gosh, this is awesome!"
So things are starting
to roll, and this is way early before Sundance and all that. But we were starting to assemble this team. Got an attorney on board, Stuart Rosenthal from Bloomhurt God in L.A. He got wind of it, and then eventually, Kevin knew the guys at Endeavor Talent in L.A. They had just broken away from their big agencies, and they formed Endeavor. So Tom Strickler and Ravenau and those guys all got together, and he got the tape, our rough cut, to them, and they watched the movie on their own, and I'll never forget it. But they flew out to Orlando. I mean, Ed and me and Greg were playing pool at a pub, and they flew out in secret, and they went into the pub and said, "We want to sign your movie up." Never happens. That never happens. And we're like, "Oh my God!" And so we were one of their first kind of big kind of buys, and so they wanted to represent the movie. So when they got on board, then things started really like falling into place. They got us kind of a choice screening at Sundance for them to review the movie, and then before you know it, everyone's talking about it, like low level talking about it. So it all builds on itself. I'm getting the blessing of John Pearson, and then Kevin Fox coming on board, and then, Klein and Walker coming on board. It all building. And the movie is standing on its own 2 feet. They're loving the film, which was really encouraging to Ed and I. This is fresh. This is different. This is truly a scary movie. We think this could be a big film. So all that ramping up started a strategy. How do we get into the big festivals? And so we had a strategy submitting to a couple of choice, like LAFF and LA, or Sundance, a couple other ones. But Sundance is that's the holy grail, right, for indie movies. So we submitted to Sundance, waiting. And then we get a call from LAFF, Los Angeles Independent Film Festival. They're no longer around, but they were a pretty big deal in those days. And they said, "We want your movie. You're in competition." We're like, "Oh my God, this is great. And you just have to say yes." And say, "Okay, well, we're still waiting to hear back from Sundance." So, "Well, we really, really want you." And then we get a call from Sundance, and we're in. And dude, I can not tell you what a relief that was for us. Greg was a drummer, and he went out and bought a bunch of bongo drums. So we got drunk, and we were just playing bongo drums all night, just as a release, It was a blast. But so we got into Sundance, and there was for a little while there was a debate: do we go to LAFF or do we go to Sundance? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we got to do Sundance.
Yeah.
I said, well, Sundance was a midnight screening, and we weren't in competition, but in LAFF we'll be in competition. Sundance. Do Sundance. No matter what, do Sundance. Your worst day at Sundance is better than anybody else. So we decided on doing Sundance, and that's when things really started becoming surreal, because we had no reference point going into this world, right? You
guys are fresh out of the gate.
A bunch of knuckleheads that were working day jobs, and so suddenly we're being courted at Sundance, and because of the split screen show, which was primarily viewed by industry folks, they were it was a big kind of hit with the industry elite in LA. So they had caught wind of this weird kind of documentary, this kind of about these three filmmakers missing. No one's sure what was real or what wasn't real. So it's screening at Sundance. So it was getting some buzz prior to Sundance. And then we started our website about 6 months prior. So we were getting some heat off the website, ramping up into Sundance. So we had a lot of anticipation built prior to Sundance. So Endeavor, rented a big condo out there, and we're holding court for all the distributors. Ed and I are sitting like a couple knuckleheads in a posh apartment in Sundance, and like Lionsgate's or it's before Lionsgate, Artisan and New Line, they're all coming in. "We love you guys. We love you. Blah, blah. Can't wait to see your movie." Like this what's so hard about this? This is the way it's all done, right? We had no clue that this is really unusual. And then we screened our first night at the Egyptian, which was completely nerve-wracking, as you might imagine. And we sold that night. We were the first one to sell at Sundance, and we sold to Artisan like at 2 a.m. that night. And it was.
Did they up their offer after watching it?
Yeah. No, it was a bit of a bidding war because Miramax was interested, New Line was interested, and Artisan was fresh out of the gate. They had just done Pi the year before, Darren Aronofsky's movie, and they had big success with that. And that was like a $5 or $6 million box office, which is huge for an indie movie. So they felt that Blair Witch was even more commercial than Pi was. So they're thinking this could be $20 million, for them. And it was funny because once they bought the movie, we were like, yeah, we're all celebration, and all the press is reporting and all that. So the heads of Artisan, Bill Block and Amir Malin, took us all out to dinner. So we met all the whole Artisan team on one side of the table, and the Haxon guys are all on this other side of the table. So we're dining, having a great time. It's the whole, honeymoon phase, right? So we're at Sundance having a great time. And we were having a few drinks, and someone said, so we just asked, what do you think this is going to make in the box office? So we're pretty confident this will do could be 20 million. We're like, what? $20 million? And then I laid a bet on the table. I said, I'll tell you what, if we break 30 million box office for our whole run, you guys had to buy us a competition grade foosball table. Because I was really into foosball at the time, and I got all the guys hooked onto it. I bought some cheap Walmart version foosball table for the office, and it was our stress reliever, right? I mean, we get all bunched up in the end, we go out and play a game of foosball, and I got a bit of an obsession after a while. So I said, and I always envied those big, at the pub, you got the massive big Tornado foosball table. So you guys got to buy us a competition grade foosball table if we break 30 million at the box office. And they're like, yeah, whatever, okay. And it was a joke. We did 32 in the first weekend, and lo and behold, man, like 2 weeks later at our offices, the delivery truck comes up and they're offloading that foosball table. We're like, yeah! We took a picture of us in front of it, and it was we were off to the races at that point. So it was a storybook, like dream come true for any indie filmmaker. What happened with Blair Witch? It was so unusual, and you could not have scripted it to be like more amazing. But it is definitely the exception to the rule. But yeah, it was a crazy special time, and I'll never forget it. It was incredible.
And for a lot of people, they probably don't know this, set records in the sense of, I've read both 22,000 for the production, 35,000. So let's say ballpark 30,000. Yeah. And how much did it do at the box office total?
All in, it did about 250 million worldwide.
Lowest production budget to highest grossing film. Yeah.
I mean, it's when you're factoring in $1999, I think it still holds the record. And I think DVD was like close to 60, 70 million. It was pretty crazy. So yeah, it was insane. We did spend more money once Artisan bought the movie. We shot, they wanted us to shoot new endings. We shot 5 new endings for it.
No kidding.
Because they weren't sure about the guy standing in the corner in the basement.
I thought that was beautiful.
So they were freaking out about, I don't know if this, so we did a test screening in New Jersey, and people were like not sure about the ending. And, truth be told, even when you get in advance, like a company buys your movie and they give you, an advance, you don't see that money for like a year.
No kidding.
The advance is like on paper, but they take the advance out of the box office. So the movie has to get released and start bringing in revenue, and then they give you your advance. So it's
smart.
So we're still broke, right? We've got the biggest hit at Sundance, and everyone's talking about, how great everything is. We're still trying to pay our phone bill, right? So they said, look, you guys want to shoot 5 new endings. We think we want to test them out. So that was money right then and there. We'll pay you to go shoot. All right, we'll go do it. So they paid us to shoot these 5 new endings, which were all the endings that Ed and I threw out and that we hated, but we shot them anyway, cut them in. Nobody liked them. So it was funny. I remember calling Bill Block, co-president of Artisan at the time, said, Bill, the guys and I, we talked this over, so we really want to keep the original ending in the movie. And Bill was like, to his credit, said, well, Dan, I don't know. I think it's going to cost us a lot at the box office, but we'll keep your ending.
He qualified the statement. Yeah,
so it ended up being one of the most talked about aspects of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. But
and that's what I found just disturbing or bothering is, I mean, the end left you in such...
Yeah.
I mean, you went through a roller coaster of emotions the way that ended.
It's the ambiguity and not really knowing what was going on, and it was the creepiness of that, I think, that lent itself. And it's a fine line to walk when you're playing with ambiguities like that. But it just goes to show you that nobody really knows anything in the business. Even the executives, the artists, and nobody really knows. They're like, everyone's sort of, it's a bit of a crapshoot no matter what you do. So it's always a hard road. It's always a tough sell. I mean, any dream usually is. And, but again, if you're confident in what you're doing and you think you've got something cool, and you can usually tell whenever you're pitching something or an idea or a nugget of a creative idea and people respond on the kind of the ground level, you know you're on to something. And that was what Blair was. We pitched that basic premise to anybody. Like, really? When are you getting that footage? Well, I mean, what kind of, you knew you were on to, you see a little spark in their eye. So we knew we were on to something. We didn't know how big it was going to be, but we knew we had a little bit of a hook that would turn people on. And I think any good idea is that way.
And so some weird things started to happen after the film. And I can't remember if it was you that told me or if we read this. Was there a certain organization that paid you a visit? Governmental?
Well, there was a cop. Trying to think if there's anybody else.
Was it the FBI?
No, he was an Albany police detective
who thought this was real.
Thought it was real. Got a call from this guy, and so I'm like nervous and like, okay, I've researched this. I've worked in that area for 20 years, and I've talked to my colleagues, and he's going on and on about. I've gone through the past case files. I do not see this case anywhere in the Albany area or the Maryland area. I'm just curious as to where this case, and I just stopped him. I said, sir, this is all a movie. This is all fake. And there's a long pause where I'm thinking, am I going to get arrested or what's going on? He just started laughing.
No, okay.
He just started cracking up. He goes, you have no idea how much energy I put into researching this. I go, I'm sorry, I don't mean to. He was like, well, if there's anything I can do for you guys and help out in any way, I'd love to be involved. He was a really nice guy. But I can just picture him making phone calls to his buddies at the station and all. Like, what is up with this? Like 3 missing filmmakers saying, I've never heard of this case before. And I worked that area for years. He was completely sucked in, and he goes, "That you guys did a good job because it's my job to be fooled like this."
That is the ultimate compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. At what point did you guys find out about Time Magazine?
We did a photo shoot for them. We were kind of in this sort of whirlwind of magazine shoots. Like the minute we got bought, we were purchased at Sundance. You know. Like Mike Williams, who's one of the actors. I mean, he came in late, so he just got off, steps out of the shuttle van, and like, so what happened? You got to go to a premiere photo shoot, dude. Get ready. I was like, what? And off he went. So he's doing a cover shoot for Premiere Magazine, and so it was just a whirlwind. So Time Magazine wanted to do a photo shoot with us.
I mean, not only the photo shoot, the cover.
We didn't know the cover at the time, so it was like we're. Do a photo shoot for Time Magazine. We figured it would be some article buried into the magazine somewhere. So, this is cool, Time Magazine. So we did this. We did the shoot for Time, and a lot of them, most of these shoots were kind of cheesy. They wanted Ed and I like, ooh, doing all this like scary stuff but it was fun. And it wasn't until about 2 weeks after we did the shoot that we heard some rumors through our publicist that you guys, they're talking about possible cover. And we're like, what? So we heard a little bit of, machinations about they were debating on whether or not we should make the cover or not, and a lot of it's just what's most newsworthy.
Yes,
and I think wasn't it the time where Kennedy's plane went down? Yeah, it was right around that time where Kennedy's plane went down. So, oh, that's definitely going to make the cover. I hate to think in terms like that because it was a tragedy, but we're a couple goofy filmmakers. I mean, So that was, we weren't sure. And then I was sitting in my office. We were on the Disney backlot at the time. They gave us some free kind of bungalow space. So we were sitting on the backlot. And Greg, the producer, walks in, and he had the Time magazine cover in one hand and a Newsweek cover in the other hand, same week, and walks in with Dan. I'm like, what is happening? And we were on the cover of both magazines at the same week. And we're like, and then I'm getting calls from friends. Dude, I'm in the airport. You're on the cover of Time magazine at the magazine rack. Freaking out.
Best advertisement you guys can ask for.
It was absolutely crazy. And then I remember, I've said this a million times, but I remember Ed came into town. It was the Barnes and Nobles in Pasadena. And we were in Pasadena. I can't remember what it was for. I think we were doing some interviews or whatever. So Ed and I went to the Barnes & Noble in Pasadena, and we were walking by the magazine rack. And Barnes & Noble, especially in Pasadena, has a big film section, right? Lots of filmmaker magazine, a movie maker magazine, and Variety, all there. Every one of those magazines had us mentioned. From Variety to Movie Maker, it was Blair Witch mentioned, Blair Witch. And we're like, and we're looking around. Nobody knows who we are. We're like, we're on every one of these magazines. And we were just like trying to process.
From obscurity to
this becoming a crazy thing. And it was just getting started. And then we got into Cannes. So we were like, you're going to Cannes. Like, okay. So we hop a plane, we're going to Cannes. And we get off the plane, and Jeremy Walker, who is absolutely one of the most brilliant publicists, I think, who ever lived. He's just an amazing individual, and got us, he understood social media and blogger. We did interviews for the smallest blog to the biggest publication you can. I mean, we were doing interviews back to back for a solid year. But so we get to Cannes, and Jeremy said, okay, so got you guys on a panel. So, oh, cool. I think I'm going to do a little panel. And so they usher us. It's like the day after we arrived. So we're kind of like, so jet lagged. So we go to this panel. Ron Howard is on the panel. Spike Lee, John Sayles, right? And then Ed and Dan. We're like, what? Okay, we should be in the audience on this panel. But anyway, we're up there on the panel, and we're sort of the flavor of the month, right?
Yeah,
we're the shiny new toy. So everyone's, hey guys, clapping, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're even here. And Faye Dunaway is in the audience.
No kidding.
Asking us about how much she loved our movie and asking us all these questions about Blair Witch. It's like, you're Faye Dunaway. I have a few questions for you. So it was surreal. I mean, being in the south of France, if you've ever been there, it's just surreal in itself, right? It's like a fairyland to be there. And Cannes is Hollywood on steroids, right? Mm-hmm. International audience and all that. So we won the Prix du Lucenès award, which is the Young Directors Award. So we won that kind of coveted award, which was really an honor and amazing. And but it was 2 weeks of just non-stop party, interviews, publicity events. I don't think we slept more than 5 hours the whole time. And so they had a party. If I'm rambling too much, just let me know. But we had a party on the beach for Blair. It's, again, another one of many surreal moments. But they shipped in like 300 trees and planted them on the beach to make woods in the south of France, right? Well, we didn't know this. We were like, so Ed and I get trucked. So you got to go to the party. It's like, oh, we just want to sleep. It's your party, man. You got to go. All right. So they took us to the party. And there's a huge line down the croissant, the boulevard there, and And so we go in the party, like, let them in, let them in. We're going, hey, sorry, man. We're all embarrassed. We go in, there's a forest on the beach. Right? There's probably several hundred people at this party, all having a great time. They have no clue who we are. And we're sitting there, and we're on the beach. It was Rob, Greg, it was the whole gang, Mike, Rob, and Ed, and Greg, and myself, sitting on the beach, and we just all sparked up a cigar. I get emotional. But we're sitting there looking at the south of France, like one of the big hotels across the boulevard, woods surrounded by woods, broke as shit 6 months earlier, and the whole world is like at our feet right now. Smoking a cigar, I'm like, what has happened? It's like the most amazing experience ever. And we just sort of like, we did it.
Man, you're making me emotional, dude. That's
the thing is, you tell yourself that dreams do come true. You tell yourself that. You're constantly telling yourself that because that's what's motivating you. Like you see other people win the lottery. You see other people win, and make their dreams. And it's you read about it and you talk about it, but when it actually happens, when you see there and you're living your dream, it just reinstills your faith in everything, right? It's like, I wish everyone could have this feeling. I really wish everyone, it doesn't come easy. It's a heck of a lot of hard work and you need to be surrounded by an amazing team. But it can happen. It can and does happen. So that was one of those moments. And then like right after that, Jeremy came up, tapped us on the shoulder. Hey, Mel Gibson is at your party. I'm like, Mel, can we meet him? Sure. So Mel's hanging out at a party. And they do that a lot at these Hollywood parties. Yeah. They'll ask a celebrity or two to come in to kind of up your profile. Like Mel Gibson was at our premiere party. So we go over to where Mel's sitting and it's all cordoned off. He's got his bodyguards and everything. He's like, hey, I'm here to meet Mel. I'm like, hey, Mel, how you doing? Hey, guys, congratulations. It's a nice guy. But that was just the beginning of all these amazing surreal moments. I could go on all day and tell you about what that whole 2 years was like. But yeah, realizing the dream is always an emotional thing for me because, especially when you start with such humble beginnings. And I wasn't like some of these folks are. I wasn't like dirt poor or anything like that. And
you weren't rich.
Working class family. I worked my way through college. It wasn't easy, but a lot of people had it worse than I did. But it was the American dream, man. It was really the American dream where you have a great idea, you have a good team, anybody can reach that pinnacle of success if you've got the wherewithal and a good team and a good idea behind you. And that's what is so amazing sometimes when you see that happen. And it was just very fortunate that we were able to do it.
Let me ask this, because I've seen this in a lot of high performers, guys who've won championships, and they're like, hey, I just don't want to talk about that championship anymore. Yeah. Do you still hold the Blair Witch Project as your most coveted film?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. The thing with Blair, it's always a double-edged sword in a way because you get defined by that. That's like, it's like if you did one deployment, that was the deployment. That's all anyone knows you about. Like, well, no, man, there's 100 other things that we did that we are equally as amazing. It just didn't get the publicity. So I'm incredibly proud of Blair Witch, incredibly proud. It came at the right time in my life, the right time in the film business. It will always be something that I'm proud of and will be known for.
But do you want to be defined by that?
Well, in some ways, yes, because we worked hard on it. We thought we were doing something cool and original, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment. I don't hold back at all. We worked really hard to make that happen.
That's awesome.
But at the same time, I have other tools in my belt right? And like my last film, Skyman, I'm very proud of. And we got a great review in New York Times on that. We premiered at the Austin Film Festival. It wasn't Blair Witch by the social standard or the society standards in its box office, but I'm very proud of that movie. And I'm pretty much proud of every film I've been on. And so, but that to me is all bonus, right? Blair Witch was like, you climbed Mount Everest and you totally, it's the highest peak in the known universe right now.
You did it without oxygen.
With no oxygen. You told the Sherpas to take a hike and you're doing it, right? And you made it. And so every other mountain peak is cool and great and they're special in their own ways, but Everest will always be Everest, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword that you, at least for me, you don't want to be solely defined by one thing, but at the same time, you're so honored and humbled that you got to do it. And so I never really get tired of answering the Blair questions or people that are interested in it because it might be their first time hearing about stuff. And I've always said that it is best to be known for something, right?
They're not.
They'd be completely not known for anything. So I'm, and the sort of the armchair philosopher in me sees Blair as an amazing case study. Like looking on the outside, looking in, like, why did Blair happen? And what made it what it was? Because I get asked these questions all the time, and some very kind of intellectual, informed, journalists will have these long discussions about what was it about Blair that was so different. I'm like, I was on the inside looking out, but sometimes I like to be where you are, kind of analyzing it from a more objective perspective. And so it's a really interesting case study to kind of look at what generated so much interest and made people so, in some ways, easily fooled. I still have people today that think Blair was real. And most of my films, if you notice, sort of dabble in that space about what is it about phenomena that people want to buy into. And it's a little bit of psyops, making movies is manipulation, right? And I see it happening in the media. I know exactly what the game they're playing, whether it's...
If you spin the narrative long enough.
If it's MSNBC or Fox News, I get what they're doing. I see how it's all doing it. And so it's as a case study, it's an amazing thing to evaluate about how susceptible we are as humans to want to believe something, and you just give them enough of that information, and people they're all in.
It's funny you mentioned a case study because I talked to a buddy who went to film school, Loyola Marymount, and he said, he's like, it's basically the case study that every you can count on. It's a case study in every film school now,
right?
And I know you've got a lot more films in you, and I know we've talked about teaching. And that you find this emotional return on investment of teaching the next generation. You just see the excitement in their eyes. Is there ever a future where you may do that permanently at one point?
Yeah, I think I could see myself doing that. Well, one, it's just easier on the body.
I mean, you can do it remotely.
You can do it remotely. Because making a movie it's stressful. Both physically, psychically, mentally, it's very, very stressful. And as much as I love doing it, I also love encouraging others to do it. And I also acknowledge that, look, I'm of my own generation. I can only see life through my own prism of experience. And there's a whole new generation of filmmakers that are seeing things differently. And it's exciting to see the kind of stories they're telling through social media now and different form factors and all this new VR. My son's into VR now. Like, this is an incredible new world of storytelling. So encouraging them to do what it is their generation wants to do. But at the same time, linking them back to the fundamentals of storytelling. There's still value. It's like that's why we studied the classics when I was in college and reading those classic books and all. this is what a good story, I mean, read Mark Twain and Shakespeare and those guys. There's a reason why they endure, because they're following those basic rules of storytelling. So instilling that fundamental core that there's no free lunch. Mm-hmm. You may have all the gimmicks and you may be an Instagram influencer now, but next week, if you don't really have what it takes to engage, you don't have that foundation. So I like to think I can be the person that, like, foundation's important, but do it in your own way. That's really satisfying for me. And they'll come back with stuff that you just didn't anticipate. I mean, I've got other filmmaker friends of mine that are teachers, and they really love it because you get to learn and you get to experience kind of whole new perspectives on storytelling. It's just a lot of fun. It doesn't pay anything, but it is fun.
I've told my wife, she thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, what do you want to be when you're 60, 70? I said, I want to be teaching at a university, leadership development. That's it.
Right.
And probably very few universities will hire me. Yeah. But there will be one, and maybe the University of Idaho out of Coeur d'Alene. Yeah. I will do that. I don't care. But, you know, you've got a project of your own, and talk about being hard on the body. I want to talk about this. So you're doing a bike ride to raise funding for the Wounded Warrior Project.
Correct. Yeah.
Tell me a little about that, when it starts, the distance, and you're doing it by yourself, which is a little risky.
It's a little risky. I mean, I kind of got back into biking during COVID. It was you know, there wasn't a lot to do, especially here on the island, and the gyms were all shut down and everything. So, you know, I didn't want to just sit there and, you know, become a couch potato. So I can't really jog because I got like a bad ankle. So it starts to bother me when I'm jogging. So took up biking again, started biking around here, and then discovered this subculture called bike packing. And I love camping. I've camped my whole life. So this is cool. It's a combination of biking, adventure biking, and going out and basically camping. And so one thing led to another, spending a lot of time on YouTube, looking at videos and all this. There's this big tour divide. It's called the Great Divide Mountain Bike Route, GDMBR. And it starts in Banff, Canada, and goes all the way down to the Mexican border. And it's all off-road mountain bike trails, connection of, you know, logging roads, gravel roads, occasional highway, but mostly 90% is all off-road. And you're going down the spine of the Continental Divide. So it's absolutely gorgeous, but a lot of climbing. It's about 180,000 feet of climbing. So I said, this typical of me. It's like I learned to skiing a little bit in Sundance. Like I did the bunny slope, like the first part of the afternoon. And then I'm going to go do a black diamond just for the hell of it. Right. That's me.
That's a choice. That's definitely a choice.
No, it's stupid. But so like, I'm just getting this bike packing thing. So I'm going to do the granddaddy of them all, which is this particular route.
And how many miles total?
It's 2,700 miles end to end and about 180,000 feet of climbing. So I said, I'll do the first half last year. That's what I did. So it was and I couldn't go into Canada because of COVID restrictions. Yeah. So I had to start at the border. So I went from Roosevelt, Montana, and got all the way down to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is about 1,400 miles. So that's part one. And I'm finishing up part two in 2 days. I leave in 2 days. So I'm going northbound this time. I'm going from the Mexican border, Antelope Wells, and stopping in Steamboat. So that's
through Texas?
No, I'm going through New Mexico into Colorado.
Okay.
Where coming down, I went through Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and then into Colorado.
Beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I can't tell you how beautiful it is. I mean, it's hard work, but it's absolutely beautiful. And the people you meet are incredible. But yeah, going solo, unsupported, and I can show you the bike out there. It's like your whole life is on your bike.
Yeah.
It's like your kit's completely on your bike. And you go for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 days, you're in the backcountry and you have to camp and all that stuff. And then you'll come into a town and you'll resupply. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And then you go back out again and you're just doing the trail. So
are you ready for the heat? Because I mean, it's what, 60 outside right now, and now you're going to step into 100.
I know, it's crazy. But last year it was actually pretty hot, and it was 106 degrees in Eureka when I started last year.
Damn.
And then there was fires all the way down Fires everywhere. But I grew up in Florida, so I'm used to the heat, and it's it's a lot about, I'm sure you know, with doing as much PT as you guys do. It's like listening to your body. So much of us listening to your body, not trying to push through and be a badass. Your body is really good at communicating what it wants and needs.
We're just not very good at
listening.
There you go.
Yeah. And a lot of guys that get into trouble, they try to, like, so many, they'll start off the route on their bike, and they're like weekend warriors. They'll ride a few times a week, and they'll go out, I'm going to do 100 miles a day. It's like, you blow your knee out in 3 days, and suddenly you have to tap out. It's like, just start off easy. If it's hot, ride in the mornings or ride in the evenings. Don't do it in the heat of the day, and just be smart. Take it in smaller chunks, and as you condition into the ride, then you'll be more robust as you get up into the higher elevations where it's cooler. But yeah, a lot of it's just camping techniques and just being smart, avoiding bears and that sort of thing.
The realization that we're not spring chickens anymore.
Absolutely,
is hard for,
you don't recover as fast. You get an injury and it takes a little bit longer to recover. And knock on wood, nothing major will happen. But I always, I've got my spot tracker, so search and rescue can come pick me up if I'm really in trouble.
Is it like a little button?
It is got a
I've fallen and I can't get up.
SOS button. Yeah. It's a satellite tracker. So it allows me to also send text messages via satellite. Yeah. So I can communicate to Julia and say, okay, I'll be here. I'm leaving now. Everything's cool. And she can see on the map where I'm moving. Every 10 minutes it uploads and she can track me. So if I'm
is she one to worry? Is she going to be the type of person that's checking in on
all wives worry, right? Yeah. All husbands worry. But she's like, she encourages me to do it. And so this is where I'm super, super lucky. Keeps me in shape. Yeah. And it's a little bit of that, challenge that I kind of need in my life. So
and we'll try to get this out. And now, is this something people can follow you? You're going to do check-ins on social media? I'm
thinking about taking up a notch in social media, because I've got a Facebook page where I checked in a little bit, but I might do a little better this time on this part too, because we got a fair amount of donations for the Wounded Warrior Project. Yeah, so I really want to kind of get as much as I can generated for that cause as I can. So,
well, I know you're taking a camera with you.
Yeah.
So document it. We'll cover it in Men's Journal.
Awesome.
But until then, is there a place people can go to make a donation?
Yeah, you can go to the Wounded Warrior Project website, and you put in the search function, you put my name in, and it'll take you to my page.
Okay.
So you can donate right directly on the page. You can also follow me on Facebook, so you can get the link that way as well. But
you're just showing your age with the Facebook.
I know, dude. I know. My daughter and my son, you're doing Facebook? Yeah. So I'm just getting into Instagram now. So okay, I got to do Instagram. I don't have a social media team anymore, so I gotta evolve. But yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and it's for an amazing cause, for contributing to the lives of the soldiers that make and help people like me do bike rides. This is, they're allow us to we take it for granted sometimes, the freedoms that we have in this country, and it's
Dan, that's a freaking understatement.
Yeah,
that's perspective, and don't get me started. Perspective is a powerful thing.
Yeah. And
we've had it so good. I'll use the word entitlement. We've become entitled to think that
100%.
We've become Karens in a sense.
Well, the thing is, it's just, again, we're getting back to the double-edged sword thing. It's like, as a father, I'm raising my kids not to go through the same crap I went through.
Yeah, of course.
I want to give them a better life, provide for them, not have to worry about paying for college and all that kind of stuff. So I work really hard to provide that for them. But at the same time, I learned a lot having to struggle. I learned a lot, pulling myself up by my bootstraps and that sort of thing. So you want to convey to them that what you've got is you're very fortunate. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes, allowing for this life that we have, and no one person is doing it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And when I think about defense and our soldiers out there in the field, and the more I get to know the community, I've always had a respect for it, but it's a lot of it's a cursory respect, a real deep respect for the sacrifices that are made. the intellect, the creativity that's required to do an effective job in those fields is something I don't think gets enough credit.
It's the American way.
It really
regardless of the military. I mean, we there's a reason that you go overseas and people ask if you're a cowboy. And the answer's, I grew up in Barra. You're damn right I'm a cowboy.
Yeah.
It's the American way.
Yeah. And I still like to think that we're defending the good. As ham-handed as we've been in some conflicts, but at the end of the day, most of the mistakes we've made have been well-intentioned. That we were going in for the right idea and reason.
You know what they say about the road to hell.
yeah, exactly. But there is a fundamental difference between our guys and the Taliban.
Yes.
There's a clear difference in between good versus evil, in my opinion. And like I don't want to oversimplify it. There were members of the Taliban that didn't want to be there. They were you're in a village and the warlord of the Taliban is saying, I'm going to kill your family if you don't join. So you can have a lot of choice. You join, right? So I can't say that as all of it, but
even having fought in that, I have empathy for that. This is a story from another time, but we had to watch a guy we captured for, it was like 36 hours.
Yeah.
Until somebody came and picked him up, and we ended up playing video games with the guy.
Right.
And he was I don't want to say a high level, but he was a significant Al Qaeda leader. And you walked away and you're like, hey, there's not much difference between that guy and us.
Yeah.
Other than the ideology he believes, the ideology we believe.
Yeah. So there's a different kind of something got tweaked or
perspectives, experiences. Yeah.
Yeah.
What he was fed in terms of
and when you're young, I mean, those madrasas, and they're pumping out, these extremists and stuff like that and sending them over. It's like, part of you feels sorry for the whole thing. Like I wish you guys weren't brainwashed in that regard. And we're all brainwashed to some degree, depending where we grow up. But again, getting back to the soldiers that are out there, ground pounding and doing that dirty, hard, demanding job is something I have a great respect for. And also, when they come home, transitioning back to civilian life and giving them, a firmer ground to stand on. I think that's one of the things we kind of fail as a country in some ways is transitioning those guys and gals back to
100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
That's in my really micro little way trying to help out in that regard. But yeah, I would greatly appreciate and respect what you guys do for us.
Well, we highly respect and appreciate what you're doing, raising funds for the Wounded Warrior Project. We'll make sure to promote that. But in the same regard, man, we did between missions over there. We pulled up those Haji copies of DVDs, which was stealing your IP. But no, we watched movies, man. That was how we decompressed in between missions. And I've watched more movies overseas than I do just in the confines of the United States.
It's really encouraging because everyone loves movies.
Oh yeah.
I don't care where you are. I mean, every country, every culture loves movies. And it's a great communicator. It's the one thing, it's the one medium that is more immersive than any other. And so, yeah, it's again, in my own little humble way, being a part of that process is really cool.
So we end our podcast on two questions, which I think you'll appreciate. The first one is, and I almost say, answer these questions as if your children were sitting in the room. How will Dan Myrick evaluate or measure whether he's lived a good life?
Well, one big measure is my kids.
Mm-hmm.
When you see your kid do something genuinely good for somebody, you're like, okay, I must have done something right. When you see real empathy in them, and they want to do or help somebody without being prompted or pressured, you're like, all right, so I've put another decent person into the world that will be a productive member of society. So that's definitely a great moment. And, occasionally we'll get like a teacher will call us or a friend of a neighbor and say, your kid's awesome. He's such a great kid, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you did such a good job at parents. And, we're certainly have our flaws and our mistakes, but it's really nice to hear that occasionally that okay, I was sort of winging it, but
there's no manual for that.
There's no manual. So that's a reassuring moment.
I think that's a damn good answer. The next one is, for you, what are those 1 to 3 non-negotiables, those keys to success that have gotten you here, that you would pass on to the listeners who stay still maybe stumbling on their path through past obstacles, trying to achieve success in their way? And it's a hard one.
It's a hard one because a lot of it comes with making mistakes. But if there's one thing I could try to convey to people is know what battles to pick to fight. You can't fight them all, right? So the smart money is on the person that knows where to put their energy in to fight the right battle. It's just like you're going to war, man. It's like you can't fight every battle all at once.
Like Stoicism 101.
Exactly. Yeah. You got to strategically plan what's the priority battles I need to win the overall game. So try to know when to hold them and when to fold them, because there's some arguments you need to lose to win the bigger play. And that just comes with experience. And I know young filmmakers will sit there and stand their ground on every little item. So all you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot. You got to give a little to get a little. And so try to understand that every argument doesn't need to be won. It's not a reflection on your ability. It's not a reflection on your pride. It's okay to compromise if it serves the greater goal. And that's, I think, the one piece of advice that took me a while to learn, because as a director, you're the guy running the show, and if you show weakness, and you've had those CEOs, right? Like they're afraid to show weakness. There's no way. They're really smart guys, and those elite teams, they're collaborative. Everyone said, we're on a team. Who's got the best idea here? Because that's what we're going to go with. So that's really what it took me a while to learn that. And I think that's what I try to convey. But that just took experience, realizing, sometimes your ideas aren't the best ones.
There's so much to unpack right there. But, I used to say when I was younger, if somebody knew me, I was the ultimate hammer. Yeah. All I saw was nails. Yeah. And I didn't, and you say weakness. I think you actually got to reframe. It's not weakness. It's knowing when to, as you said, give in order to take later down the road.
It really is maturity. It's understanding that there's a nuance to any operation. It's just a lot of nuance. Part of what we do as filmmakers or in the special operations community is leaders. They're leaders in this diplomacy. You're working with human beings, whether they're the enemy or your own team. You have to be able to assess what are the personality profiles you're dealing with. Some guys are great at sending them out and doing this. Some guys are great for bringing them and doing that. And so having the maturity to be able to understand that about the human condition comes with wisdom, hopefully, and a little experience, but you don't need to fight everybody tooth and nail and everything. That ends up hobbling you in the long run, I think.
Well, Dan, I can't thank you enough. I know this was a long conversation. We of course we didn't get to anything, and we will. And I know there's some future podcasts in the works with what we have. And I just went on Andy Stumpf's podcast, Cleared Hot. We talked about the 777 project, absolutely, which we're all invested into to right now. Still working to make that happen. Yeah,
but it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, according to Andy and I, come higher hell water. We're going to find a way to pull this off. But thank you for joining us. Good luck on the ride. We'll push that. And for the listeners, again, go to Wounded Warrior Project, put Dan Myrick in the search engine. His page will come in, and please, just make a donation, no matter how small it is. I know the Wounded Warrior Project will put that money towards helping the vets coming home to transition, whether it's mental health issues or helping them find employment. Dan, can't thank you enough. And for all the listeners, this is the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. Until next time.